Relatives, acquaintances, children, grandchildren commemorated his obsequies. Newspapers fattened a feature page with all he'd accomplished as executor of government plans, administrator of districts. But most of all, as a trustee of reliquaries, regent of ancient remains. The textures of time, defaced statues, desiccated manuscripts, patinaed masonry, these had most excited his ardor, aroused his care. These he'd collected, cherished, preserved for the citizenry as hooks and links to a discontinuous heritage. He'd reached back into time, pulling out skeins and swatches and derelict exquisite clumps into the light of our ordinary day. For this, he was most remembered. Part 2, Requiem. Honor him. Himself inevitably, irreversibly altered by time. The count of years pleated the textures of his skin, dimmed his eyes, and filled them with salt moisture. Pulled down sags of flesh from his fine bones. Dilettante antiquarian, gifted collector who sifted the alluvial layers of our pasts, unearthing motives, meaning out of ruins. Who turned a personal passion to public heritage. Honor him. Remember him for all he did and all that perhaps he retreated from doing. Join the lean rows of those who mourned him. Few have ventured all he had, or so failed short of mastery. Honor him. Part 3, Vigil. In the shifting breezes of an August night, trunks of moon-silvered poplar undulate between jasmine shrubs. In the park, near where, tangled in tubes, pin-cushioned with needles, wired into circuitries of sensors, monitors, he scrabbles for breath on a hospital bed. Sit by me as I keep this nighttime vigil. More parent than son now, I regard the dwindled form on the bed, the thin feet. Part 4, after the funeral. The next day brought silence as his mourners conferred him to the dust of his plains. In a darkness fragrant with leaves, they returned, wordless, between gravestones and trunks of oak, mulberry. Recalled, as they filed from the unspeaking grave, his gift of conversation that twined the listener in webs of words, ideas, thoughts. Recollected the effulgence of an overarching mind, spirit, remembered his passions of love, of rage. Some few of us wept at how those passions had been stilled in a derelict body. Mourned the transformation of wit to whines of complaint, punctuating long silences. We'd observed his mind turn towards and away somewhere, as in stricken muteness he contemplated the pain, the gracelessness of his ordeal. Part 5, Elegy. For 3 years, locked in silence, he'd explored the structures of his success and unsuccess. He had conjured in his head continuing arcs of moments, events, places, people, relived within himself his many triumphs and also his omissions and fallings short. His failure to find in his books mastery of the universe, his 2 disordered marriages and desolate, angered children. Pity him not his months of suffering, the dead need no pity. Honor instead the fastidiousness of his long, exacting re-examination. There is nothing further. Judgment is completed. Honor him.
Thank you, Salman. Thank you very much, Salman. I will now ask Muin Farooqi to come and read out a poem.
This poem is called Partition. In that year, they left the old house, taking the odor of clothes and souls. We replaced the trees and crows and planted fresh bird sounds and sleep sounds. We changed nameplates. We changed the street. Even now, when the pot boils on the old stove, making tinny sounds, it is the noise of the morning women restless and the men demanding bread. There is cement on sandstone, concrete on the ground where the sleeping desert once swam. But from the cracks in the wall, the house speaks. There is breath coming from the black loam around the rose bush. The ants speak. The wind that slaps the west wall speaks. Shadows of bones walk in the night. The house bears its soul with each monsoon drop on the windowsill.
I want to ask Mr. Zulfikar Ghaus to please read out some more poetry.
There's one more poem. Whatever you want to, maybe with so short time. Okay, here's one short poem. It's called Image in Karachi. Last year when I was here, driving back to the airport, I just happened to see this. It's very short.
You don't have to make it extra short. You can do it a longer poem.
Okay. I'm being incited now. Image in Karachi. On a mosque just below the minaret, silhouetted against the declining sun, perched on a loudspeaker that broadcast a call to prayer, absorbed in looking down at what it could consume next, a vulture. And there's a poem called A Woman Bathing. Renoir, Degas, Bonnard all painted her, an arm raised, a towel in her hand, an uplifted breast glowing abundant, her flesh radiant as if flush with desire. Her image, observed from an adjoining bedroom, a recurring fantasy in the male eye, the mistress of elaborate charms, serenely meditative in that still and seemingly vulnerable moment. Her newly cleansed body lustrous, as if she performed a ritual ablution prior to a ceremonious surrender. But her pensive, coldly self-absorbed look holds in fierce tension nature's determined design. Let the male dream of conquest. She will fill the washed womb of creation with his blood. I'll read one more, okay, that's it. This is from last year, and it's all again to do with birds and loudspeakers and stuff. It's called Silent Birds. It was the month I flew to Pakistan. The crows were quiet in Lahore. I read that in the other city of my childhood, Bombay, few vultures were returning to the Parsi Tower of silence. Birds the world over took on a troubled look, as if some unexplained failure confused flight patterns and rendered hazardous the autopilot of instinct. noisy at sunrise and sunset. Parakeets in a green cloud above the mango tree, grown silent now, without a voice in what to expect next. Bombs suddenly exploded at the World Performing Arts Festival in Lahore. My family home shook as if in an earthquake. A day later, news came from Bombay of a terrorist attack on the Taj Hotel right opposite the Gateway of India. I sat in the garden of the old family home. A bulbul hopped across the lawn and stopped, seeing me, and flew away. A crow alighted on the garden wall, opened its beak out of habit, but uttered no sound. I looked for parrots, saw none. There were 2 eagles, though, floating in the sooty pollutants drifting up the sky, gliding noiselessly in a wide circle. But one banked away on memory's programmed flight path to descend on the dusty eucalyptus tree in the garden. From that very same perch, generations of eagles at sunset had cried aloud and pierced the cacophony of crows, a cry shrill yet musical, an exultation. Not even a chicken's peep now from the eagle's open beak, its throat throbbing in a nervous pulsation among the dust-laden leaves. Then the 5th daily eruption in the sky. From the 8 loudspeakers on the local mosque's minarets, the priest shrilly called the faithful to prayer as if nothing had happened. Nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. Oh God. Thank you.
Joe Danton, I would be grateful if you'd read something now.
Okay. I have been in the unfortunate position of dreaming about poetry and other poets, and this came from a dream I had. It's called Workshop Dream. All poets lived in one low-rise resort. Sleepwalking, I climbed across the white balconies to Sean O'Brien's apartment. I expected him to be angry, but he wasn't. He said I was not the first poet to arrive this way. Inside, Kenneth Koch was cooking breakfast, a Faber editor was applying After Sun, and there was a woman I'd not read. We walked through the quadrant in O'Brien's slipstream, noticing everything worth noticing, the blanched undersides of leaves, George Surtees's towel, the memory of wet feet on stone. We stepped onto the beach. The water made the sound, cliché, cliché, cliché. We shooed away the avant-garde who sold necklaces made from shattered windscreen glass. Tiny grains of sand, I added. Sean, our windbreak, shook his head and pointed out to sea, but there was nothing. He advised us to look again, and this time, sure enough, on the surface in the troughs between waves, a huge flock of Odenda.
Very good.
Very subtle rhythm, wonderful cadences. Thank you, Joe. Khalid, would you care to read something more by Tawfiq? Have you got another poem? Khalid Ahmed, do you have another poem by Tawfiq? Could you possibly read one?
No, and then finish. Because we have enough time now.
Poem for Fawzia. Having come to these fields, this pond, to brood on early death, I remain to praise the lavishness of nature. Other seasons may be niggardly, not autumn. It gives and takes with abandon. Into its slot, shishams will one by one insert all their green coins while the wind riffles its currency of rice. Dear lovely girl, You write the rainbow of our prayers and give us strength to face the continuing chill. Sorry. Dear lovely girl, you write the rainbow of our prayers and give us strength to face the coming chill. Shadows lengthen softly. In the seepage, reeds and the nurse-like lilies stand rooted in coolness. An annulled wildberry tree tests the water by trailing a broken digit there. Now acceptance settles in the mind with the nicety of a dragonfly. And even as I fling up my arms in an excess of pity and love, the pebble of my presence breaks the porcelain herons into blurred flight.
Thank you very much indeed. Another wonderful poem. We don't have very much time, but I would like Zeba Hassan Hafiz, Zeba Hafiz, to read out a poem on Iraq.
These two poems, The Blood of Iraq and Mesopotamia, soon after the invasion of Iraq. And at that time, I was affiliated with the University of California, San Francisco, and there's a reference to it over here. The Blood of Iraq. Blare of music, a roadside cafe with its Starbucks coffee looks down at the University of California. Bodies half bare, cold and